Monica Land. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Melanie Addington. I'm with Tallgrass Film Festival. However, when I first met Monica, I was at Oxford Film Festival in Mississippi, a place that I think means a lot to both of us for a lot of reasons. Monica, tell me a little bit about why you decided to make this documentary.
This documentary, Melanie, is more than 15 years in the making. And I say that because I initially had the idea to do the film around 2005. And what that stems from is I've always loved history, any kind of history, Black history in particular, but any kind of history. I love documentary films. And I just thought, why not put the two things together? Primarily because all of the films or film segments that I had seen in documentaries on Aunt Fannie Lou, it was always one-sided. And what I mean by that is they were wonderful, don't get me wrong. They were exciting and wonderful to see, but you always saw the same people talking about her colleagues, people that she had worked with, people that she had helped, and that's great. But I thought, I've never seen anyone in my family interviewed about her, talking about her, and I've never really seen any of those films get into her personal life because she had one. She was a person before she got involved in activism, and so I thought it would just be so cool to see that, even cooler to do it. And so that was around 2005, and so around 2007. I talked to a cousin of mine, Selena. She's a feature film producer, had done some really great things, Usual Suspects, The Accused, Lauterer. And so I talked to her to get some direction, and it really wasn't her area because she was into feature film. And so she said, there's this producer you should meet, Keith Beauchamp, and she gave me his contact information. And Keith had just done the untold story of Emmett Lewis here. And so my cousin Sue Hamer, she connected me with Keith. I talked with Keith. I'm like, you know what? I need for you to help me do this. And he's like, this is a great film. I agree. Let me connect you with some people. And so he connected me with Davis House, a professor at Florida State University, who now actually is the Fannie Lou Professor of Rhetorical Studies at Florida State. And through Davis, I met Dr. Megan Tucker Brooks, who is a Fannie Lou historian. She and Davis had written a book, The Speeches of Fannie Lou to tell it like it is. They edited all of the speeches together. And Megan has subsequently written 3 more books about Fannie Lou. And so through that connection, I also met our director and editor, Joy Davenport. And so it just seemed like just a wonderful grouping of people to tell this story. And so Megan had laid all of the groundwork, the foundation for the film because she had researched it for a decade. And so she just kind of set the stage and we worked from there. The reason that it took us so long to get to this point is funding. It's hard to fund a project like this.
Yeah, I think
So many
people don't.
people.
Yeah, I was going to just say, I don't think people realize how much work goes into, especially something with so much archival footage. Can you talk to how that process was and even getting the rights to show some of this stuff?
It was a nightmare, Melanie. It still is a nightmare because we're not completely done. I mean, the film has a broadcast date and we're advertising it, we're promoting it, and we're still in final editing. And that final editing has a lot to do with licensing the footage. And so paying for that, our budget primarily is for the archival footage. Just to give you an example, some of that footage cost between $4,200, $6,000 a second. A second, and that is insanely expensive. And so getting the money for it was again the hardest part. We were able to find a lot of footage, and then there was some footage we couldn't find, primarily because At that time, Aunt Fannie Lou became involved in activism in her 40s. And so at that time of civil rights, Jim Crow, people didn't really think what well, I'll say some people didn't really think what she had to say was important. And so some people, some media outlets didn't bother to document it.
Yeah.
It was maybe simply labeled as portly or overweight Black woman speaking in the South. And so a lot of the footage we're stumbling across literally by accident. A lot of it is mislabeled. Her name is misspelled. And
Mhm.
so that caused us a lot of problems in looking for footage that we knew existed, but we could not find, still cannot find. But as I said, we literally stumbled across so many things completely by accident, gold mine of archival footage. And so that's the problem. And then licensing it. If I may speak to this briefly, I never knew so much was involved because there's a lot of footage out there. We found so much on YouTube, but you have to do your due diligence and find out who took that footage, who owns it. And a lot of these people are no longer around. The production company is defunct. And so just trying to find who do we license the footage from was a crossword puzzle in itself.
uh, we were talking off camera a minute ago about, growing up as a little kid, you didn't know that you had this civil rights icon as an auntie. It's just this figure in your life, and you didn't think to ask those questions because as kids we don't know. So what did this project
Exactly.
mean to
Exactly.
you? Were you able to learn more about your aunt and really better understand your family
Oh,
legacy?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
What
definitely. I'm
what was
sorry, go
something you
ahead.
didn't know? What did you learn that you didn't know before?
Now that may be a spoiler alert,
Okay,
but
yeah. I don't want to spoil
when I
anything.
when but when I was a teenager, I took Black history in school, and so I mean, once I became of an age of realization, I knew who she was. I started doing the homework, and back then, not giving away my age, I don't care. There was no internet. You had to go to the library. You had to look things up. You had to go to the microfilm and pull the newspaper articles, and so I did that. And so I began to learn of her legacy, and again watching these documentary films. And so, as I said, I learned more during this process from Megan, from Joy, from Davis than I did the whole time, my whole life, because thanks to them, they had done the research, so it was in print. And we shared these things, and I'm still learning things. I just learned a few years ago that she helped organize Freedom Summer. I've been working on this for 15 years and didn't know that.
Wow.
And so some things are coming out, that I did not know that she was as involved in that as she was, and she was. She helped to organize it. So learning things like that, learning that she was such a visible and requested presence of that time. One of the things that we mentioned in the film, and that she said herself, was that she had spoken at every college campus and every university campus there was. And we're actually believing that because we're finding snippets in articles, where she was at Berkeley, she was at Tougaloo, she was at, Shaw, things like that. She really got around to promote her message of racial equity. And so just finding that out, that she was so in command, excuse me, so in demand as a public speaker, that
Yeah.
was very interesting.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so much of the
so just
civil
things like
rights,
that.
yeah, civil rights history is so centered around the male experience. So it's nice to see these stories remind us of how powerful women's voices were at this time. We focus so much on the widows, of Medgar, and it's nice to just have a woman who said, you know what, this isn't right, and just started standing up for herself. Talk about how powerful that was. I mean, she transformed a lot of things. What does it mean to you to have an aunt that really just said, you know what, I'm going to speak up in a time that was really dangerous for her to do that?
It was, and this is something that I've also learned recently from our director and our researchers, was that she did stand up. She knew it was a risk, but it was more of a risk, let's just say, for my uncle, for her husband to do that because he was a black man. And just think about it, if he had taken the stance that she had, he'd be dead, because they would have easily assassinated him as they did with Malcolm X,
Yeah.
Medgar Evers, Dr. King, and so many others. But because she was a woman, it was probably more than likely that she would not be assassinated. She was beaten. She was severely, severely beaten. She had assassination threats. She lived with that threat daily. But she was able to do what she did because she was a woman. And so she wanted equality for everyone, and this again is something that I heard our director say. She always said she wasn't fighting for civil rights because that can be given and taken away, but she wanted human rights. She wanted what people deserved from birth. She didn't care whether it was black or white. She wanted everyone to have, and she wanted everyone to be treated equally.
Yeah, she everything she said was so just really always spoke to me, learning about her growing up. I really love some of the quotes you include in the film, which I won't destroy, but I do want to talk about one of them. The Mississippi is America's problem, not a Mississippi problem. I think that is something, having family from Mississippi, living there for 20 years, I feel like I've had to sort of say something very similar to that my entire life, trying to explain why Mississippi matters to all of America. Um, I'm not going to make you go political in any way, but I just, in terms of pulling out these really important quotes that she said, some of them very iconic, some of them I hadn't heard before. What went into the decision of what things you would include in there dialogue wise for her? Because she did have a lot of speeches and she had a lot to say. So sort of why did you cherry pick specific things between you and the director? What was the decision for telling the framing of this story specifically?
Now that is more of a question for our director because, as I said, I had initially wanted to focus on her personal life and the
Mhm.
family element, but the archival footage just was not there. She spoke about her childhood growing up, and we definitely focus on that in the film. But the framing for the film came from the footage that we found.
Yeah.
And it's so strong and it's so profound, almost prophetic, a lot of the things that she said.
Mhm.
The thing about Mississippi being America's problem, again, I'm not a historian, but just kind of relating to that, to some of the other things that she says. She made quote, said this quote said this several times, that they would appeal to the president to help them in Mississippi, to help them, but they never got the help. But she said, let somebody be hurt in the Congo, and they immediately sent relief over there. And she couldn't understand that, how they could help other countries when people were starving and jobless in Mississippi, when they had the power to do something. And that's one of the things that she spoke to. And so again, just relevance. It is so profound that the very things that she was fighting for then are still happening today.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that we grappled with working on this film all of these years, we wondered and we worried about relevance. Okay, let's try to get this ready for Black History Month. Let's try to get this ready for Women's History Month for March. We were looking for specific windows, But we realized that we didn't need that because everything she said is relevant every year. You know, when from the very first cut that I think that you saw, Melanie, we had like a compilation of situations from Trayvon Martin to Philando Castillo to Eric Garner to other black people that were killed by police or whatever. And so we actually had to remove that because every year it was something topping that, And our executive producer at WGBH, he says that's going to date your film, because in let's just say 20 years, there's going to be a story so much bigger than George Floyd, but people are going to watch it and say, okay, who's George Floyd? Because something else more, larger has happened in our society. And so we just found that it's relevant every year, every year, every year.
Yeah.
It's so appropriate. And so that was very interesting to us in this process.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So Fannie Lou Hammer's America will have its world premiere as a special presentation from PBS and WORLD Channel on Tuesday, February 22nd at 9 p.m. Eastern. There are some other opportunities to see the film, and we will put a lot of information underneath the video so you can find it. Monica, thank you so much for joining me. I am so happy that you didn't give up, that you didn't stop this project with all the many frustrations of making a documentary. I know how challenging that can be. Congratulations. Is there anything you want to say to viewers to go check out the film?
No, just, Melanie, it's something that I said earlier about asking questions in your family. I really regret that I did not ask the people who knew her best when I had the opportunity, simply because I did not think about it. Like my grandparents were very close to her, all of my uncles, aunts and such. My mother has good memories of her, and I was able to channel some of that into the film. But we have a young filmmakers workshop as part of the curriculum from this. It's the Sunflower County Film Academy. And one of the things that we do in that film is we encourage young people to ask questions in their family. And, talk to your grandparents. What have they done? What were they involved in? Write it down, document, make short videos. And they're doing that. And some of the things that the students found in our 28 class was so interesting, they had no idea. And so I ask questions. Don't ever hesitate. Don't ever be afraid to seek out your own history. Everybody has a history, and it's an interesting one. So look into it.
Absolutely. That's such a powerful and important message. All of our past history of our family, there's, lessons for the future too there. So Monica, thank you for joining me. I'm very excited. It's going to be playing here in Wichita, Kansas, which a lot of people don't know is the site of the first sit-in in the civil rights ever. So I'm very excited to be highlighting your film. So yeah, I know. See, we keep learning things.
Thank you, Melanie, for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Monica.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the opportunity.
All right.